Hello and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening in from today. My name is Ryan O'Donnell and I'm a Divisional Director with Informa Middle East, based in Dubai. Informa are delighted to join forces with the Balanced Scorecard Institute, USA, to bring you this webinar on strategy, execution, and innovation. This webinar and its questions are being recorded today, and the slides, audio, and questions will be available 24 hours after the completion of this webinar. We've allocated time at the end of the webinar to answer questions that will be submitted throughout the webcast. So please do take the opportunity to use the built-in question functionality throughout the presentation. Informa Middle East have an ongoing strategic partnership, and together with other offer conferences, training courses, and webinars to participants like you with the Balanced Scorecard Institute. This webinar is being held in conjunction with and in the lead up to our annual Strategy Execution and Innovation Forum, being held in Dubai from the 7th to the 10th of May. Webinar participants and registrants will be provided with an exclusive 20% discount off the cost of the entire conference registration. The final slide in today's presentation will provide you with a special discount code and all of the information you require to register your attendance. If you like what you hear today, please do join us in the next month in Dubai to meet both of today's presenters in person. I'd like to now hand over to Balanced Scorecard Institute President and CEO, Howard Rohm, and Vice President of International Operations and Senior Consultant, Joe DeCarlo. Howard and Joe will now take over to take you through today's webinar on strategy execution and innovation. I do hope you enjoyed today's broadcast, and please do remember any questions you have as we proceed throughout the webinar. We will endeavor to answer as many of them as possible. Thank you very much for taking part today, and over to you, Howard.
Thank you, and good day to everybody. I have been doing this for a long time, and both in the government and private sector and nonprofit sector. And so what I want to do is share stories with you today about what we have learned about combining strategy execution and innovation. And I'm joined today by Joe DeCarlo. Joe, you want to say a few words?
Sure. Good morning, Howard, and good morning to the attendees for this webinar. It's an exciting webinar to be on for me because when we talk about innovation, I spent about 25 years with the IBM Corporation, starting back when there weren't any PCs, there weren't any internet, and storage, a big deal about storage was 10 meg. And so it's kind of a full circle in my experiences in this innovation area, Howard.
Very good. We've come a long way, haven't we?
We certainly have.
All right. Some topics today. How do these two topics fit together? It turns out there's different ways of looking at it. For those of you who are strategic planners or thinkers, strategy management practitioners, and have read any of Mintzberg's work on strategy, he talks about different schools of strategy. There's different schools of innovation that we have seen as processes, culture, and as standalone strategy. So we'll want to share what we've learned in that area. We'll also talk a little bit about how you measure strategy and innovation. Joe and I will both be doing workshops at the conference that Ryan mentioned on Balanced Scorecard, Advanced Balanced Scorecard, and measuring strategy and innovation. So if you're interested in that, we'll share some more details at the end of the presentation. And then we'll close with a little bit about innovation management. I like to start with a little bit of context. We think of three phases for high-performing organizations. At the highest level, at high altitude, you have to have a process where you formulate your strategy. You have results from the assessment, internal and external assessments. You have scenario planning. You have SWOT analysis, PESTEL analysis. There's a lot of tools that we can use to help refine and get to a few strategies for an organization to proceed with. Aligning the organization is also a high-level phase where we want to become strategy focused and move strategy into operations and into aligning employees and the processes and the technology that they use to the organization's strategy. And then strategy execution is acting on strategy implementation. So we tend to think of those as three connected links. For those of you who are in this business, have been for a while, you realize that there's not universal truth around the world as to what these words mean. Different folks have different definitions, so I thought I'd start with the ones that we use, so that we're all on the same page for the rest of the presentation. So we look at strategy execution as a combination of leading and communicating and managing in a climate of teamwork, continuous improvement, and change. And we think of innovation as ideation, evaluation, selection, development, and implementation of new or improved products, services, programs, and also the processes that we use to produce those. So with those two definitions in mind, we'll proceed through the rest of the presentation. We also think about two types of innovation: the breakthrough innovation, where we come up with brand new ideas, new products, new ways of doing things, and the sustaining innovation, where we're continuously improving processes, for example, to improve workflow and production lines. So let's start with the first topic: how do strategy and innovation fit together? I'm going to talk about three ways that you can look at this combination. The first is innovation is a step in a strategy development process. This might be grow the business strategy, for example, and innovation is one of the nodes that we want to think about as we're putting together a business growth strategy. Another way to look at innovation is as part of the culture. It's sort of baked in to the way we do business around here. And finally, the third way that we'll talk about today is innovation as a standalone strategy. So let's talk about innovation as process first. You know, when we look at a workflow and we look for ways to reduce waste or improve quality, reduce the cycle time to gain efficiencies, we see in the sales department, for example, that we have 2 touch points after the inventory clerk passes on an order. Is the order ready, yes or no? Well, if we were doing a continuous improvement process project, we might look for innovation as a way of saying, let's reduce the number of steps in this workflow and just have 1 touch point so that we can reduce the time that it takes to go through this. So continuous improvement innovation. A good example of that is Amazon, where they have consistently innovated both horizontally and vertically, and they continue to experiment and innovate on a nearly constant basis. And you can, proof of that is the number of new ideas that come out, number of new ways of doing things. For example, the one-click purchase has actually been licensed to other companies. As a culture, innovation is culture. To quote Steve Jobs, creativity is just connecting things. So the goal here is to empower employees to create new things, make them better, and improve processes. A lot of folks do this with the way they organize the workplace, right? Work hard, have fun, make a difference in your organization. So innovation is encouraged. It's baked in. It's built into the business from culture throughout everything that they do and think about. An example recently in one of the newspapers was a quote that IBM is pulling some home office workers back to regional offices to reinvigorate innovation. They found that by having so many folks work outside of offices, that they lost the idea spark that comes from what I call grazing at the water cooler. You know, folks just having informal conversations and dialogue and creating new ideas as part of the culture of the organization. So innovation is about change, and change is about changing hearts and minds. Some things that we look for when we talk about building a culture of innovation and change. One is a strong leadership commitment. That's a critical factor. Employees have to understand that innovation and change are part of the way we do business around here. We also need leaders who are what we call walk the talk. It's not just what I say, it's what you see me do that matters. Employees have to be informed. We have to have good communications so that they understand the why and the how of the business case. Why are we doing what we're doing? And allowing employees to find what we call the WIFM, the what's in it for me. You have to have training, and you have to have an infrastructure that supports innovation and change. And you also have to allow for what we call idea failure, right, to find things that work better. It's not just a matter of coming up with new ideas. It's a matter of testing those ideas and tracking the successes and living with the things that don't work, with the failures. So we see change enabled when employees are involved and equipped to deal with the change, and they see a visible commitment to innovation and change. Another quote, this time from the CEO of Amazon, says, if we want to be inventive, you have to experiment a lot, which means you have to fail a lot. You want to embrace what he calls high judgment failure. It's worth trying. It didn't work, so let's try something different. All of our most important successes at Amazon have been through that kind of failure. Fail, try again, and repeat that loop. So we get smarter as we make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. One of the things that we've learned is that strategy-focused organizations start with the end in mind. For those of you who have read any of Stephen Covey's work, that's one of the 7 principles of highly successful people, right? Start with the end in mind. This is not a Photoshop or an altered picture. This is a real picture of a highway of one of our clients somewhere in the world. And when the person who was running the line machine was asked why he didn't move the tree, he said it's not in his job description. He draws lines, he doesn't remove trees. That's what happens when strategy is not everybody's job. We tend to look at our jobs in sort of narrow isolation rather than the big picture. So let's look a little bit at innovation as strategy. I'm going to share some tools with you that we use a lot. We've done this around 200 for around 200 organizations in 40 countries now, and we almost all of the engagements we use a strategy profile or strategy canvas as a way of helping an organization understand what their discriminators are relative to the competition, if it's private sector, business, and industry. The same profile, by the way, will work with government and nonprofit. You can compare yourself, for example, against the best practices or against targets where you'd like to be, or where you found a best practice somewhere else in the industry, a benchmark, for example. But the idea is to look at the differentiators that differentiate you from the competition. We use something called a customer value proposition, which is has 3 components, what we call the functional attributes of the product or service that we're in business to provide, our image, and the relationship that we want with the outside world, with our employees. What do we want to be known as? One of the discriminators can be innovation, and you can then compare on a subjective scale. This is not highly analytical, but it certainly helps focus attention on what I call the stuff that matters. Namely, what do we need to work on in our strategy to get better at our craft? So we use the strategy profile as a tool to help us do that. And of course, you want to work on the gaps, right? So we would want to make sure that when we develop our strategy and look at our scenarios, that we actually have addressed the gaps in where we recognize our shortcomings, for example. Another way to look at innovation from a strategy point of view is as a strategic theme. I'll use a little balanced scorecard framework here. We talk about the pillars of excellence, or the strategic themes, strategic focus areas is another term for it. We think of building a strategic planning and management system a lot like building a custom house. And the strategic themes The pillars are the equivalent of load-bearing walls if you're building a house. And innovation can be one of those pillars. The floors of the house would be the perspectives. The foundation would have the foundational components of a organization, engaged leadership, two-way communications, and strong core values. And then the roof of the house would have things like the customer value proposition, the mission and the vision, and so on. Each strategic theme has a strategic result. That would be the equivalent of the lintel of a house holding up the roof. And so the analogy is that if we make innovation a strategic theme, it goes throughout the whole structure of the organization. It touches customer and stakeholder views of what we do, the financial performance, or if you're a government or nonprofit, the stewardship component of the organization, internal business processes, and then the last perspective, organizational capacity, what Kaplan and Norton called learning and growth. So that's another way of looking at it. One of the things that we do to help organize our minds around this is talk about strategy as altitude. And when we're up at mission, vision, and the customer value proposition, we like to say we're up at about 10,000 meters. You know, we're at high altitude. And as we, and when we work on projects and operations, we keep the trains running on time. We're down at sea level. You know, we're at zero meters. So the idea of strategy is that it fits in between high altitude and low altitude. It's around you know, it's around 8,000 meters, 25,000 feet. And then when we go to break strategy into its building blocks, into its next lower components, we talk about strategic objectives as, you know, down around 20,000 feet or so. So this idea that there's a connection between the high altitude and the low altitude is called connecting the dots. We want to be able to step down from high altitude to the projects and programs that we're working on a day-to-day basis. Some other themes that you might use that get at innovation that we've seen: innovation excellence, growing the business, technology leadership. Depends what, of course, the focus of the organization is. Who are its customers, its stakeholders, and what value is it trying to produce for those customers and stakeholders. So another way to look at innovation then is actually as one of the strategic objectives, the building blocks, if you will, that make up one of the strategies. So for example, we might have a strategic objective, the ovals on this graphic, as one of the objectives in the internal business process perspective. For those of you who are familiar with strategy mapping, you know that the strategy map is a collection of strategic objectives that are linked together in cause-effect relationships. And the map taken as a whole shows a snapshot of how the organization creates value. If you're in government, for your citizens. If you're in a private business, you create value. Financial would be the end of the value chain, and that would be for the owners of the business. So the fact that customer is in the top perspective in this chart indicates that this is an example for a government or a not-for-profit, where the end of the value chain is a satisfied member if you're in an association, or a satisfied customer, citizen, stakeholder if you're in the government. And financial takes on a stewardship tone because we're using taxpayer money or funds from other sources to provide our services. So anyway, we can think of innovation then as one of the building blocks of a strategy. So again, a little lower altitude than the strategic theme itself. Some other possible objectives that we have seen: increasing technology utilization, improving culture, innovation culture, increasing innovative solutions, improving process efficiency, and increased service accessibility. Let me just take a minute here and talk just for a second about strategic objectives. You'll notice when you look at these, that they all start with an action verb. A lot of strategy maps aren't built like that. They have activities or projects in them, and it's really important that you build continuous improvement into your strategy, and this is one way of doing it. We found after doing this for some years. So we always look for that action verb that creates continuous improvement potential in the strategy, and so you might want to check your strategy map against that. It's really a best practice to have continuous improvement built into that. So let's look at an example of a strategy map. In this case, we're looking at a multimedia company, international multimedia company. The strategic result that they're looking for is to be a leading innovator in multimedia products and productions. So in the organization capacity framework, we have strategic objectives that are shown here. Want to maximize technological capacity, increase the artistic expertise, improve cross-functional teamwork among the designers and the artists, continue a culture or improve a culture of innovation, and improve project management. I put a dark red circle around the ones where innovation is likely to make a difference. So for example, when you build your strategy map and then you go to the process components of the strategy map and you have those strategic objectives, you can go all the way up to the top. In this case, it's a business, so financial is in the top position on the perspectives. The end of the value chain is to increase profits for the business. But when you look at all the opportunities for innovation, rather than thinking of it sort of narrowly, you think of it as potential for making a difference in each of these strategic objectives. You get an idea of how powerful a lever innovation can be. It's not just about technology, right? It's about changing the way we do workflow, the process steps that we use, looking for places to eliminate waste and improve quality, improve timeliness. So looking at it like this, I think, adds another dimension to innovation, and it also allows you to put a fence around the components of a strategy. I can't tell you how powerful the strategy map is. It takes time to build it right, but when you get it done, it really tells a story of how the organization creates value for its customers or its stakeholders. I think, frankly, in the last 25 years, probably the best contribution I've seen to the science of management is the strategy map and the refinements over the years in what makes a good strategy map, a best practice strategy map. So anyway, by putting a fence around the strategic objective and then focusing on how you can improve within that objective, you start realizing that by connecting the objectives, you can connect the changes that innovation can make, and you can get a multiplier effect in innovation through a business. So very powerful tool. I'd advise you to use that in your own work with your organizations. Joe?
All right, Howard, I'll switch over to my machine here.
All right.
Let's make sure I got that. All right. All right, as we move through the listing on the introduction slide of topical areas that we're going to hit at, the next one in line was measuring strategy and innovation. Obviously, one of the things in this process of doing innovation or process changes that will hopefully lead to some changes in the way the business is operated, both fundamentally from a increased profitability if you're a for-profit organization, or better services to constituents if you're a government or nonprofit. We have to make sure that what we put a lot of man hours and budget into really did result in something that was beneficial to everyone. Winston Churchill couldn't have said it better. I mean, it comes down to, in the very end state, you have to measure what matters. And one of the things that we help clients get to when they start doing their strategy building, and of course, one of the hot buttons that we hear in a lot of conversations from clients today is we need to innovate. We need to change the way our innovation works here. We just need to get more creative. And that's clearly a call to action, that they know that something has to change. And right now, the biggest catalyst for most of that is technology, because it's very cheap, it's very available, and a lot of organizations can do things today that they couldn't do even 2 or 3 years ago. And so once you get the strategy built, you have to look at the results. And so we need to measure what matters as we go through this process of innovation and strategy built around innovation. There's a number of touch points on KPIs, performance measures that are used through the process of building a strategy, especially around the balanced scorecard. Starting on the left, you have a whole series of strategic measures that are associated, much like those objectives you saw from Howard's earlier slide. In the financial perspective, the customer satisfaction, customer stakeholder, internal processes, and the organizational capacity. One of the interesting things about the organizational capacity in a full all-out innovation initiative is, and most clients that have not really done or completed or tried innovation type initiatives or objectives in the past, this will be their first bump up against the culture change, and Howard talked about that already. There's a whole different aspect of culture that has to be rolled out and trained and ingrained in this process, and I'll touch a little bit more about that later. But this is a major cultural change for organizations that have not done any innovation projects or initiatives. In the center column, you've got your operational measures, which pretty much are standard operating procedure for all strategies. You know, are you increasing your efficiency? Is your output changing? Is your quality changing? Is your timeliness changing? I mean, it's very interesting when you take a look at a couple of KPIs on innovation that seem to come to the surface when you've done enough research. Is it really does come down to the percent of innovations that significantly advance the business. Now, if you're for-profit, obviously you want to see the results up in your financial perspective. You would increase profitability, increase your revenues, and along the way, you've probably reduced your costs. If you're government and nonprofit, it's all about making sure that the efficiency and the timeliness and the productivity is there using the resources that you have available. Project measures, they do not go away in this process. In fact, when you move into the innovation arena with objectives or projects, the project measures become even more critical, because one of the things that's an element that I'll talk about in just a few minutes is you're going to have to put funds together for innovation projects and innovation initiatives. They don't just happen as a part of the normal budget. So once you've decided and made a decision that you will pursue something that's innovation driven, your budget requirements are going to be a little bit different than probably you saw in the past. Employee measures, no doubt about it. I saw someone asked about in the question box about SMART, and these employee measures they're the same in a regular strategy plan and a balanced scorecard strategy plan, and in this case, in the SMART objectives for employees, they are the same aspect, except they're focused on innovation-driven initiatives and projects. Risk measures, absolutely. These probably even come to the surface faster in an innovation-driven environment because you just have a number of activities and touch points and targets that you don't really know what the outcome will be. Now, if you're just looking at, in a little bit, we'll have this concept of a core business. If you're looking at your core business, I mean, you know your business, and now the thing is you want to defend your position in your core business. So the risks are probably identifiable, but you move to the next horizon, and that is you want to expand out into something that you're currently not in now. Now those risk factors ramp up pretty dramatically. And of course, everything's driven by some kind of performance analysis and management and internal and public reporting going forward. depending on if you're for-profit, government, or nonprofit. So let's take a look at one that is just about on everyone's strategy plan, is the objective of improved customer satisfaction. And this is a good example, as Howard said earlier, of starting with the end in mind. Customer experience drives the positive behaviors. What do we want for a for-profit business? We want repeat orders. What do we want for customer satisfaction is we want recommendations. I think anyone in the for-profit world has heard the term Net Promoter Score. You want that score as high as possible, because in the end of the day, those recommendations from their colleagues, friends, family make a difference. A simple one that I use, and we used until they quit making that particular line of car, was the Saturn line of cars in General Motors. My wife was the first one to buy a Saturn, and that car is still running and requires very little maintenance. So when it came time for me to buy a car, it was a no-brainer. I just went back to the dealer and said, give me the next model of Saturn that you've got in this configuration, and the same results. So that Net Promoter Score becomes very important. If we go down through the process, it really does come down to percent satisfied, reorders, new customer recommendations. Now, by the way, if you're a government or nonprofit, you want your constituents satisfied. You may have a monopoly or the only game in town because you're a government agency, but it still is important to make sure that that satisfaction level is high, because the last thing you need is a lot of publicity on a lot of websites to say the service at XYZ agency is not up to par, here's what happened. People just don't like to hear negatives, especially in a government or nonprofit organization setting. Along that continuum, you're going to have varying elements in resourcing products, services, if you're government, nonprofit, customer facing, and the delivery, or in most government and nonprofit organizations, is accessibility of your services to your constituents or geography. If we look at resourcing, it's all about the budget, workforce, full-time equivalents, infrastructure. And product attributes, it goes back to that previous slide, quality, efficiency, effectiveness, and keeping the costs low. And customer interaction, accurate information, problem solved quickly, and your service delivery, is it on time, is the order correct? And you saw that in one of Howard's earlier charts on process decomposition. Well, the KPIs that come out of those particular process flows are very straightforward. What are your costs? What's your input-output for efficiency? What's your time to process? Accurate orders? Did you deliver it on time, and did you deliver it correctly? All those go into making up that improved customer satisfaction final KPI. And let's face it, if you're in an innovation mode and your organization has said we need to innovate, one of the first things you're going to do is look at who the receiver of your services and products are, and that's your customer. And in a little bit we'll talk about one of the major steps in innovation is you go out and ask your customers and your constituents as to what do we have to do differently, and that may drive some innovation changes or process changes that you have to do back in your organization. Let's take a look at a potential organization by perspective and themes. So we have, in terms of a balanced scorecard, we have strategic themes, and we have the perspectives, organizational capacity, internal processes, customer, stakeholder, financial stewardship. Now remember, organizational capacity is the right people with the right skills at the right time, with the right tools and the right infrastructure and the right governance. There's a lot of aspects to the organizational capacity. But for our example here, we're going to start with something that's innovation related, and we'll start with employees cross-trained. That should have an effect on putting all of those activities in the organizational capacity level in play in the internal process level. So if we can cross-train them, we have the ability now to move people around. By the way, this whole concept of cross-trained employees or agile work environments or workforces is a very major initiative on a lot of our clients today. Why? They need to keep costs low, so they need to keep the headcount low. They need to have the people trained so they can plug people in where they need them plugged in. So they're kind of like very dynamic teams that get formed to work on specific areas of the organization. And if the missed deadlines are reduced, new accounts can be more easily added, and hopefully at the end of the day, you've got more cash on hand. But let's take a look at another one, which is more innovation driven. What about if you do start an innovation initiative? The first process you're going to do is you're probably going to go out and ask your own employees what ought to change. And the first thing you'll do is you'll get a whole laundry list of ideas, and obviously you have to have some processes in place to sort through those ideas to see which ones have the biggest potential bang for the investment out the back end. This is some organizations, this is a new thing. Quite frankly, when I ask clients, how often have you asked your employees about contributing new ideas? And there's silence in the room. And it's like, why would you not ask your employees? They're the ones that are working every day with your clients and your stakeholders, and they have frontline experiences that can be brought back to the organization and be worked into the internal processes in this case, which is to reduce the process cycle time. Obviously, shorter cycle times, more customers are satisfied, and in the case of a for-profit, it's sales growth per year. So the key message here is understand how organization capacity and business processes and innovation drive customer and financial results. And this is a good slide to set the stage for the next topic on innovation management, which fundamentally talks about the concept of innovation in all types of organizations. When a lot of government ministries, government agencies, nonprofit organizations sees this chart, their first internal comment is, well, we're not a profit-making organization. We cannot use anything innovation to move us forward. That is a myth. You all have a play in this concept of innovation-driven change and strategy. So when you measure strategy, execution, and innovation, as we saw now a couple times, you start with the end in mind. What are you trying to accomplish? You have to identify the desired outcomes and write the intended result statements. You have to get very specific about this. A lot of organizations just try to go to a book, pick a bunch of KPIs, and we really don't know if they are attached to the organization strategy or not. You have to put every performance measure under a stethoscope or microscope before and after the critical process steps. It's never a first done deal out of the chute or out of the starting line on performance measures or KPIs. You have to review those. That's why in our process from the Institute, that Step 9 evaluation, if you follow it religiously, then you will do that on at least a quarterly basis to look at your performance measure results. You have to think about where you can apply innovation to the selected processes and measure before and after effects. There's no question about it. I mean, that key performance indicator I mentioned earlier about the percent innovations that significantly advance the existing business, in that case, you're going to have a series of KPIs that will talk about what the business was before, and you're going to have a series of KPIs that are going to talk about what the business is now that you put the innovation in place. You measure the contribution of the new products and services at the margin. Same KPI. What contributions did they make? Where did you see the biggest change? If you've got a multifaceted product line, you may even find that if the innovation was applied to one product area, you may see the demand fall off for other products. Well, that's just a realization that whatever you did new with the latest innovation changes made product A better than product B. And the marketplace is clearly saying, we like A. And as Howard said, you need to bake in the innovation conversations at management review meetings. Those management review meetings, depending on level of the organization, and it should be at all levels, you're going to talk about innovation there as much like you're going to talk about strategy as you go through each of the daily routine. So let's talk about innovation management. Now, and from experience, this is both my experience inside the IBM Corporation. I was involved in software development, software design, and rollout. And so I sat through a lot of meetings that are very similar to this slide. And it's interesting when you look at enough of the innovation process techniques, all of these particular terms like market opportunity analysis, product development, technology evaluation selection, high-tech entrepreneurship, and then launch and commercialization. They all seem to take on the same guys, just on different labels. But the fact of the matter is that when you start an innovation management process, it really does start with the customers and competitors. You need to start by asking your current marketplace exactly what you want. Otherwise, you're working in a vacuum. And if you want to really innovate, you have to go out and get their frontline field experience from the customers and competitors. You have to look at yourself inwardly and say, what do we currently have from our own technology capabilities? What do we have that we can use at the current? What do we need to do to refine? What do we need to go out and buy? What do we need to go out and partner with? And that aspect of the entire innovation process is just growing exponentially in terms of using any one of those levers to go out and positioning yourself to a different horizon of innovation. You have to look inward at your own product development capability. And then you should probably start identifying and taking on the identification of an entrepreneurial environment for any innovation management approach. And in the case of some organizations we work with, just introducing the word internal entrepreneurial activity is something new. They didn't look at themselves like that. We are just departments A, B, and C lined up to do X, Y, and Z, and we've done that for the last 30 years and we'll continue to do it the same way. Well, right across the street, your competitor might be doing something different, similar in the marketplace to your products and services, but they're doing something a little bit different. Well, they got a little bit more entrepreneurial about what needed to be done to satisfy the market. And then eventually, you're going to launch and commercialize any of your innovation or your process improvements going forward. Otherwise, you just did a lot of budget expansion, a lot of resource expansion, and you haven't really seen what you were looking for. And the circular spin in and spin out there, I should explain, sometimes during this process, you're going to find out that yes, what we want to do in terms of that target, the end in mind of where we want to be with the innovation at the back end, we can do it internally. So we can spin that inside the organization. Many times you have to go out and create a new venture, and that's where these partnership alliances, licensing technology from other sources comes in as a new venture creation. Now, I want to take you through something that's been in the technology world, and it really applies to the technology, government, and nonprofit and services world for some time. Now, there's two continuums when you take a look at the horizons of strategic innovation. If you're a business and industry or for-profit, you have two axes. The y-axis is definitely about profit performance. Horizons, the innovation world in for-profit organization has one end in mind, and that is to grow the business. And so what are you going to do differently tomorrow than you were doing today? And the time frame can be anywhere from months to years, but in most innovation processes or product development, it's time is year. The first horizon in the 1999 discussion about the alchemy of growth was labeled the extend and defend your core businesses. It's what you do today. It's your mission statement, what you're doing today. You want to extend them and defend them. What do you have to do differently? Over the time between 99 and now, if you look at a lot of literature, you start to see this term called core, which is innovation in existing operations and markets. So these labels have morphed a little bit, but they basically mean the same thing. Core is what you're currently doing in operations and markets today. If you want to move to Horizon 2, you're sitting in a business, and we're taking the business and industry for-profit view right now. You want to build your emerging businesses. You have some that started as a derivative or an offshoot of what your core businesses were, and now you want to build on those. In the latest list of literature, you're going to see this word keeps cropping up called adjacent. It's innovation in new but related areas of the business and markets. And finally, and this is out on the fringe, is the Horizon 3. It's create viable options for new businesses. You know, what could possibly happen? You know, would anyone have thought that, unless you were a hardcore watcher of Star Trek back in the early days, that we'd all have handheld communicators? That was a Horizon 3 at that particular point in time. New businesses, mobile communications. And in this case, it was very transformative, and that's the latest word that you see in a lot of the literature today. Innovation to create new businesses and markets, and you've seen what happened when the technology curve has matured in some of those cell phone and mobile markets. We've seen companies come and go. So they've gone through their own Horizon 1, 2, and 3 aspect as we go through. Now, one of the things in business, you have to kickstart your process, you have to give yourself some kickstart questions. And we purposely listed these from the lowest level to the highest level because these questions starting at 1 are basically focused around Horizon 1. And there's a couple of more questions that are in Horizon 2 and 3. But it really starts with could we increase sales and services to the same customers or constituents with the same product or services mix? And again, we'll go straight up, but what these set of questions really do is gives you degrees of freedom to do whatever you want to do in this innovation space. You may not want to do much outside of Horizon 1. You just want to make sure you defend your space in Horizon 1. But you know, to really be here tomorrow, you need to start looking at Horizon 2. So how could we expand the sales by developing better delivery systems for the customers? Now, if you really want to get really into the high risk side, depending on what your business is, how can we grow to change the industry through acquisitions and alliances, which is pretty standard fare for a lot of businesses today. So these are a set of questions for the for-profit world. Now, the government and nonprofit, they have a play in the horizons of innovation as well. Your y-axis gets changed from profit to program and service reach and effectiveness. That's what government agencies and nonprofits are all about. Are you improving the quality of life and capabilities of your constituents and your nonprofit target audiences? Same time frame, could be months or years. Your horizons are very much core, improve the cost effectiveness, and transformative. What can you see that is doing something different? So consequently, you'll see that you have a play in the 3 horizons as well, and it's not just something that's for the for-profit world. That core is innovation of delivery of existing operations and program services. You're just getting better at what you do and being more cost effective. Why? If you're more cost effective, you've got more budget allocation capabilities to use those budgets for other initiatives. You can improve the cost effectiveness as you go through. Every government organization that gets a budget allocation is being told by its budgeting aspects that come through from the government, we want you to get more cost effective. And then eventually, you as the service deliverer for the government, for the ministry, you have to sit down and bring back to the government budget process how you're going to change things that might have to change in the future. I'll give you one that is a very base Horizon 1, which I just saw recently. I'm at that age where I signed up for Medicare. Medicare had only 2 ways for me to pay my monthly statement. I could write a check, or I could let them automatically deduct something from my checking account. Well, I personally don't like that. Now all of a sudden I see a notification come through that says, good news, we've changed the delivery capabilities of your payments. You can automatic withdraw, you can write a check, or you can give us your routing and account information from your checking account on a one-on-one basis, and we'll do it that way. Hallelujah. I mean, that's exactly what I was asking them for many years after I had to go on Medicare here in the United States. Same set of questions. You need some kickstarts. Do we have a clear understanding of the stakeholders' needs and the available programs and services that satisfy those needs? If we don't, then you really need to step back and think about how you're going to start on this innovation-driven changes to your business. Could we extend the reach by offering services to new stakeholders? Another one, look it up on 5, getting up to Horizon 2 and 3. How can we expand into new service areas or localities not currently served. One of the nonprofit organizations that I worked with here in the United States happened to be in San Bernardino County. San Bernardino County is the largest geographic square mile county in the United States. It has everything from deserts to mountain ranges to municipal cities. And one of their biggest elements that they were dealing with was how do we get the services out to those constituents and stakeholders in those desert areas. And so they were playing in the Horizon 2 and 3 without even knowing it at that point, and they were getting into the innovation thought about how we get our services out there. So you need to talk to your customers. Well, IdeaStorm is how Dell does it. Dell started this in 2007. They simply went out and said, tell us what you think our product should be or could be. And as of the screenshot of the IdeaStorm site for Dell, you can see at that point they had 745,868 plus ideas submitted. And they turned out of those six-figure numbers, 550 plus. Now, these guys in that little top recent contributors, do they get paid for this? No. They are such dyed-in-the-wool Dell clients and customers, they'll give them the ideas for free. And you can see that this is not an inactive site. March 29th, March 21st, these are all, I mean, this is a pretty good clip for February and March for them. It allows them to bring the ideas in to move the Dell innovation needle forward. And it's very active when you go out and look at that site. Here's one that's probably up close and personal to all of you, regardless of where you are in the world. Starbucks does the same thing. You can sign up, you can submit ideas on products, you can submit ideas on experience, and you can submit involvement areas because they are very much corporate social responsibility driven. Well, my message here is when you look at the number of ideas for those products, do you think the staff, the corporate staff at Starbucks would ever think about 47,969 ideas for coffee and espresso drinks? I think not. The easiest way to get the ideas is to talk to your customers or constituents. And there's a lot of technology out there in the world that makes this very easy for you to do now. And that's why I said earlier we're benefiting by a change in technology. When you look at enough literature on innovation-driven initiatives and change for organizations and strategy, there's 5 elements that start to focus, come to the surface on a repetitive basis. Howard already mentioned one of them, leadership. Leadership makes innovation a priority. And if you haven't been an innovation-driven organization at the present time when you want to start doing innovation, this is a big step. The leadership has to get their mindset set. And it has to make sure it happens in a systematically driven era. In other words, you don't just go out and solicit a bunch of ideas and then the rest of the organization doesn't hear about them anymore. The leadership has to make sure that that word gets out. You have to focus on the people. Key thing is here, make sure you empower the employees, partners, customers, and others to contribute. You have to identify those ideas and you keep the ones that are best. So that means you have a process in the background that you vet every one of these ideas. That means you've got teams that look at those ideas that come through. The key thing here on an innovation initiative is that you have executive management or managers, middle managers assigned, and they are accountable. So you might say that that becomes a performance KPI for those managers saying, how many ideas did you get in? How many did you vet? How many did you fund? And what was the end result? The process, very structured and dynamic. You get the ideas from inside and outside. You're going to wind up developing new capabilities. You got to support the business cases. You got to make sure that the innovations are subsequently delivered. That was the whole process, whole point in developing innovation-driven initiatives or projects. And you have to make sure that the benefits were realized. Right back to that KPI about innovations that significantly advance the existing business. This is one that's going to create new levels and new types of funding. So if you're in core 1 or horizon 1, you're working on your core businesses. You probably got budgets already earmarked to do process improvements. But now you're going to take a little look at an idea about moving something that's innovative in. How are we going to change over to the latest technology driven that's going to make an innovation change to our processes? But if you're going to start playing in horizon 2 and 3, you're going to have some funding buckets that are put in place that are going to deal with the risks of expansion and the risk of moving into not seen at this organization ever, but we know that's where we need to go. And eventually, again, we're back to that benefits realized. You know, you have to have those in place, because why? You'll miss major opportunities and for innovation that could be missed. Now let's talk about the big kahuna, so to speak, the big elephant in the room, which is culture, especially in organizations that haven't had any innovation-driven initiatives or project or strategy. Well, you have to develop that culture across the organization. You have to make sure that everyone is looking for ways to improve the business today and tomorrow, and it becomes ingrained in the organization's thought processes. And you have to make sure that these teams are rewarded and recognized when they get it right. Are they going to get everything right? No. Howard already talked about you have to have a failure-tolerant organization on some of these innovation initiatives. Now, talking about the culture, I went back in my notes. I had the very great capability of being a civilian attaché for the retired Admiral Hyman Rickover, who was, as anyone knows, their submarine history knows, that he was the father of the nuclear navy. So just think about it from an innovation standpoint. We're going to replace all the diesel engines in the submarines and put nuclear reactors inside the subs. On one of my close breakfast meetings with him, I asked him that question. I said, what was your key to making sure that you got this innovation changed for the basic submarine? And he came back to me and he said, first thing is you have to make sure that those teams, and this would be those managers I talked about earlier, they're focused. They stay focused on what they are looking at and what they're trying to do. You have to realize that when you get your team together, you got a whole bunch of great people, great knowledge, great experiences, but many of them may be dancing to a different set of music. So the first thing is you have to get them in the same music script. You have to get them together, and you have to make sure that you keep them isolated and focused on what they're working on, and don't let them get distracted. You have to create an atmosphere of creative stress. I thought that was a great quote, because I've heard that from other technology customers, clients that the Institute has worked with. You have to create a creative stress, an atmosphere of creativity, which keeps it very tight and very high RPM, revolutions per minute of everything that they're working through. You have to keep reminding them and keep everyone competing to solve one problem. We don't want to go in looking at one end result and people get off the rails and looking at different things. And as Admiral Rickover would say, if anyone knows his history, and this goes back to those innovation managers, there's only one ringmaster. And in the case of these teams, it's that innovation manager. He's like the ultimate project manager on this, or she's the ultimate project manager on this. One ringmaster keeps everything moving in the right direction. Howard?
Thank you, Joe. We'll close off the presentation, and let me flip back to my screen here. Catch up with where Joe was. Okay, I think one of the common misconceptions is that we're innovating and we're communicating, and I've always liked this quote: a common misconception with these is the illusion that they've actually taken place. I hope today that you've got learned some different ways of looking at innovation, and realize that you can look at it through different lenses, and that it is reflective of a whole organization. It's you can't just think of innovation as something with a fence around it. It affects processes and people, and involves technology and strategy and so on. So it's complicated. It's multidimensional, and I think if you approach it from that point of view, you'll be better served than just put one person in charge of innovation. You know, the chief of innovation. The idea is to make us all innovative and think in new ways to move an organization forward. It's a journey, not a project. I think that's the way to close this off. Ryan, you want to pick up here? This is the availability of discount if you're going to join us for the strategy execution and innovation forum in Dubai. You can go ahead and contact this person. We have posted a PDF of the slides, and you can get them here if you want to. And I think the recording of this presentation is going to be put up by Informa within by tomorrow, I believe. So you'll have access to 2 versions of the presentation. So I think maybe we should open it up for questions. Do we have any time left? Ryan, I'll let you be the ringmaster here to...
Yep, absolutely. I think we should proceed with some questions. There's been some that have been posted throughout. So I know that Joe's been looking at them and answering a few throughout. So if you guys want to have a look and address some of the specific ones, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, Howard, let's talk with the first one. This would be a good one to kick off with. Who in the management would be accountable for innovation management? Is there a certain role or department? Who also monitors and reports that?
I think when most folks hear innovation, they think of an IT solution that we have to apply technology to improve a process or a workflow or something. You know, I think today, hopefully, you've learned that there's other ways of thinking about innovation. You know, the chief strategy officer would have a role in this. If you have a strategy management office, they could have a role in innovation. I don't think there's one answer to who should lead innovation. If you followed the thread through the presentation, I'll repeat what I just said a little while ago, that innovation is about all of us, not about one of us. And you know, I guess the way to think about it, you could actually argue that this could be an HR function as well, because we're trying to change the culture. And if we change the culture, you know, and we have water cooler conversations, and we make it easy for folks to come up with new ideas, and we accept failure, that's all about changing the organization to be more innovatively focused. So I think it takes a team to figure out where to put innovation in an organization, but recognize that even if you create something called a chief innovation officer, his or her job, you know, is not to do it alone. I'll give the same advice here that we do to folks who set up strategic planning. You know, we don't do it with one individual. There may be one individual who's the ringmaster, but the reality is that if we're going to become a strategy-focused organization, we're all going to have to be involved in that. So, for example, when we build these balanced scorecard systems, we involve a multiple group of people. You know, we'll do it with 10 or 20 or 30 folks to make sure that there is buy-in as the process is being run, as the scorecard system is being built. That way, when those folks go back to their individual organizations, they're part of the solution. You know, it's their strategic plan. It's not just the head of strategic planning, his or her plan. That doesn't work anymore. So, you know, one lesson learned here is make sure you involve a team, you involve a group, and you start building employee buy-in, whether you're doing strategic planning or you're doing innovation planning. It's a group effort. It's not an individual effort.
Okay. We had a question about Can you, regards to training, should we start with the process or with the mindset, culture? Well, I'll take that one, Howard. Basically, it's a combination of things. Once you've got that executive buy-in or that leadership buy-in that says, yes, we need to look at some new innovative way to change our processes. We need, our product line is, this is another term that I hear occasionally from for-profit organizations is our product line is stale. In fact, I just recently saw that and in the fashion industry, that's a very big one. You got to keep the fashion industry has a constant change in what's appealing. In some product areas, organizations know that they've pushed their product profitability with their current product line as far as they can go. They need to make a change. So the key thing is it's a combination of things that you have to put in place. You got to have the right culture in place. You know you're going to take a look at the processes. You know that the leadership has to be committed to what they need to have done. You need to be able to commit funds. And you need to make sure that you're really anchored in what your customers or stakeholders need, regardless if you're a for-profit or nonprofit or government.
Yeah, I would add that it's a lot easier to start a training program than it is to change the hearts and minds program in terms of how long it takes to see results. But remember, when you do training, that it's not training that's the outcome, right? The outcome is improved skills or improved knowledge or improved abilities. And a lot of folks put the emphasis on the wrong thing. They think that they're going to count training and that's the accomplishment. Again, if you go back to the advice from Stephen Covey and start with the end in mind, what I want are smarter people. And how am I going to get that? Well, I can go outside the organization. I can train within. There's different strategies you could use to get smarter people, better processes. So put the emphasis on what we're trying to accomplish. It's a key takeaway from this.
Let's take this one. In terms of strategic management and focusing on execution, what is the best way to coordinate the balanced scorecard approach with organizational dynamics, or OD, organizational development, and action research modeling?
Wow, let's see. Let's think about that for a minute. The balanced scorecard is a big tent, and it involves a lot of different elements of an organization that's trying to get to higher performance. I like to say that you can put your project management in the balanced scorecard. You can put performance measurement within the balanced scorecard. If you think of the balanced scorecard as an integrated strategic planning and management framework and system, that's different today than it was 20 years ago when we thought of the balanced scorecard as a way of organizing performance measures into 4 categories, right? So today it's much more dynamic. It includes change management. It includes continuous improvement. It includes strategy execution. It includes innovation. It includes strategic initiative management. So I think if you think of the balanced scorecard in a broad sense and say, where do some of these other things fit? Where can they make a contribution? It's the same as bringing in these different tools, SWOT on the front end, or PESTLE, internal and external analysis, performance measures, aligning the organization through cascading. All of these things have a home in a balanced scorecard system. The key is to get the sequence right. You got two things you have to worry about. One is the altitude that you're at, and the second is the step that you're at to make sure that what you're working on connects with what already has been built. We like to call that connecting the dots as you go down in altitude. So, I would ask you to ask yourself the question, where can I put another tool, another model, another capability into the balanced scorecard framework so that it makes a contribution and we get better results out of the system? I'd have to really think through the nuances of that to answer it more specifically, but start with the big picture, I guess I'd say, and see where you can put things in. For example, project management, the PMP certification, that fits really nicely into the internal business process with process improvement projects. So you can bring in the elements of project management measurement, right? Risk and schedule adherence and scope creep and resource adherence, they fit into a balanced scorecard framework when you think of the framework in a broad sense as a system.
We have a number of questions about getting a copy of the presentation. You will get a link emailed to your registration email for this webinar with a link where you can download the presentation that was given today. Here's an interesting one that I think was asked. How do you see a combined role of Chief Customer Experience Officer and Chief Strategy Officer for innovation and strategy execution? Well, I think basically from this presentation today, those two individuals or teams should be talking to each other on a consistent basis because it's the customer experience or customer relations. In fact, working with one of my clients worldwide customer relations aspect, they indicated during their strategy build for their department that one of their constant streams of information and connections is to the strategy officer for innovation and strategy, because that's where they needed to make sure that the products were being redesigned and the new feature functions were being added that the customer experience feedback was giving them. And by the way, that was a tech company, but that doesn't matter. I've seen the same thing happening right up the road from me here at one of the county governments. A very big aspect of understanding and getting feedback from the constituents to come to their offices as to what they need and how this particular agency has to change. So those two have to be almost connected at the hip and have to maintain a very open and candid communications line between each other.
Yeah, let me reinforce that with an example. My wife worked for one of the large cell phone companies that has since gone out of business, and I remember at a party that we went to, I was talking to the head of research and development, and later talking to one of the sales senior sales folks, and I asked them, well, how do you guys talk to each other? How do you get research and development into the new phones designs? And the guy said, we don't do a very good job of that. He said, we don't have a formal structure for taking the results of what the R&D folks are coming up with, the new ideas, and what I'm hearing from customers who want specific features in the next version of the mobile phone. And I never forget that conversation, because it just struck me that, these guys aren't on the right team. There is no team at the intersection, the Venn diagram of where these two interests intersect. And so maybe that's the way to look at it. Think about it like a Venn diagram where you find the overlaps and make sure that we have folks who can talk sales and who can talk customer experience and who can talk research and development, right? It's a mix of skills that have to come together in an innovation sense to move something forward.
Hard and light at a time. I think we'll take one more question, but we'll let the audience know that we'll capture all of these questions and gen up a response to each of them, and then mail them out en masse to the registration database that was picked up for this. So all of you can do benefit from what all the your colleagues were saying on this call. Let's see. All right, and I think we got one here. This is a good one to end on. In your experience, what company has the best or better strategy on innovation? Can this be measured? I have one in mind, Howard, but I'll let you talk to that one first.
Well, we talked about how it could be measured through different types of measures. I think the key is it's not just one measure. It's not a measure of innovation. Now, technically, you could build a composite index that might be called the innovation index, right, or indicator. and you could use components from where you've applied innovation in different parts of the business, whether it's to product development or process improvement or IT fixes. So you could come up with a master indicator like that. But I think that misses the point because you want to have innovation in the various departments, that where they're applying continuous improvement. So the question is, how does you measure continuous improvement? And we talked about that earlier. You can put your performance measurement stethoscope in different parts of the process and decide to make some changes and see what the difference is on the outputs and then the outcomes. So that's the way I would look at it. I mean, I've got a company in mind that does this really well as well. So there are examples, but I think the key is how you look at innovation is not just as one thing, but it's a collection of ways of doing things, ways of thinking about things, and they need to be measured individually and then maybe combined in a weighted indicator for management executive dashboards.
Yeah, I think one of the key things on, especially that part of the question was what company, and I'm going to also add in government agency or nonprofit, has the best or better strategy. I think in this day and age, because of the improvements in technology capability and accessibility, most companies will to survive, especially the for-profit, will have to master the art of making a lot of mid-course corrections very dynamically. Because of that change in technology, you're seeing things like the old stalwarts of high-tech companies like Amazon, Apple, even Google, and then also on the government side, I was very impressed last year when I saw the entire Dubai city capabilities that were being introduced. Those things are all technology driven. So the companies that are playing a niche role today could get crowded out very quickly just by a simple change in some base or foundation technology, which they were capitalizing on in January, but now has been disrupted and made moot by December. And so there's a number of companies that come to mind that can do this dynamic, I call it the dynamic two-step dance, but they have to do it in 2 steps, 3 steps, and 4 steps to stay ahead of what transpires in the technology, which drives a lot of their innovative-driven services and products. Howard?
I think that's it for me. I appreciate everybody's time. We had very good attendance. Hope to see you in Dubai, and this is an exciting topic, and we'll share some more. We did a previous webinar on strategy execution that went into more depth on that, and that should be available through Informa or through our website for those of you who are interested in more of a deep dive on the strategy execution side.
Very much. Thank you. Again, echoing what Howard said, thank you very much. Both Howard and I are on LinkedIn, so if you need to contact us or you don't have a direct email contact, you can hit us up through LinkedIn, and we look forward to seeing many of you in Dubai in May.
Ryan, back to you.